Hey family, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 on the podcast, Our Roots Podcast, coming to you from Botánica Candles and More, where only the strongest roots see the light. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please subscribe to the channel and share this video. Today is 𝗲𝗲 and Obatala. And today I'm sitting with a gentleman who has been initiated in this Orisha for 15 plus years, an upstanding gentleman in the 𝗲𝗲 and Orisha community here in Central Florida, Mr. 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲.
How you doing, Joseph?
Ricky, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. We've worked together multiple times.
Yes.
I can't remember an Orisha ceremony that my wife did that you weren't present.
Correct.
And all of the positive effects and work that you've done with us. So it really is a pleasure to have you here, being that you are one of the main children of Obatala that we interact with on a very frequent basis. So thank you once again.
And thank you for inviting me. And I'm always appreciative of you and your wife, Erica.
Thank you very much. I'm sure she's going to see this and be very thankful of that. So, Rick, I want to kind of get into your background to kind of, edify you and help people understand why you understand this Orisha, which is yours, so well. 15 years in Orisha priesthood. Who were the people that initiated you into Orisha, my brother?
Well, my godfather's name is Marcelo Vasquez. He's got crown Changol for 56 years.
Wow.
His name in Ocha is 𝗶𝗸𝗍𝗍.
Okay.
And my Jabon also had Obatala crown Ayaguna for, I'm correct, 27 years.
Wow. And where did you initiate into Obatala?
Here in Orlando, Florida.
Wow. Okay. If you could please let us know your name in Orisha as well.
My name in Ocha is Ochanla, which means the medic of the Orisha.
Very nice. Now, 15 years in priesthood, how old were you when you first interacted with this culture that you can remember?
Wow. I was actually 4 years old.
Wow.
When I started. And I started with my beads, how we call the 𝗃𝗍𝗍𝗍.
Sure.
And I started growing. And then as I was like 10 or 12 years old, I received my warriors.
Nice. Now, where are you from? Where did this journey kind of begin?
Well, we're originally from New York, but
Nice.
I came to Florida when I was little. So practically I've been here all my life.
Nice. Nice.
And I started off because my story is very weird because I was sick. And my grandmother, that at that time was not crowned, but she needed to be initiated in Ochun. We went looking for different people. We met with different babalawos. We went with different Orisha priests, which one was called 𝗿𝗵𝗍𝗶, which is very well known in the state of Florida. 𝗵𝗵𝗍𝗶𝗍, which was also babalawo. His wife, they're both 𝗵𝗵𝗍𝗶, they're both passed on. They're both. That's where I started my journey. And then I met my godfather very young, and he started molding me. And he got me into the flow, how we say.
Yeah. The mayumba, When was the first time you heard about Obatala? Do you remember that first, who's that kind of moment?
Actually, as a little kid, because I used to go to a lot of tambores, my godfathers, and guidos, how we say, drummings, and that's how I started learning a little bit more about the religion.
Yeah. What did you find interesting about Obatala specifically? Like, what were some of the characteristics you're like, I'm kind of leaning towards that energy?
Actually, it was coincidence.
Okay.
Because I was more into the spiritualism.
Nice. So you started with the muerto.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And as a young kid growing up, seeing, the different houses we dealt with and the people, it started pushing me more towards the religion. Out of my family, I was one of the main ones who got, that wanted to deal with this.
Yeah.
And little by little, when I got my guardian angel pulled, and that's when I found out. And I said, wow.
What was that feeling like when you got that confirmation? Did you expect it to be him, or were you thinking somebody completely else?
Actually, I was thinking it was a 𝗃𝗏𝗏.
Okay.
Growing up.
But when Obatala actually came out, what were the kind of the emotions and things that, flew through you?
Firstly, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, and then from there, I was happy.
Why so? What did you feel that Obatala was going to provide to your life at that point?
I felt like because of what I went through as a young kid, as a child, honestly, being in and out of the hospitals with many different surgeries growing up,
Yeah.
I felt my padrino, my godfather used to say, this is what's going to help you, how do you say, grow and get out of all these situations that you're in.
Well, your name in Orisha became very impactful, I would imagine, because when we're talking about Ochanla, the medic of Orisha, and the role that I guess ultimately Obatala played in your life, saving your life, like he kind of saves all of ours, it just lets you know that the things that come out in 𝗃𝗏, how concrete they are, with our destiny and the things we go through. A big thing with me is because, when we speak about Obatala, everybody talks about the white cloth, how peaceful he is, how calm he is. I really want to paint a different picture. I want to paint a more honest picture about this Orisha, because everyone loves to talk about how wonderful he was, and he is, but
Yes.
I want to really touch in on what did it take him to get to being the head Orisha, the father Orisha, the pure Orisha,
Yes.
You being a priest, before we get into different patakis that touch on this topic, your flow through life, have you seen that growth in yourself where, hey, maybe I started this way and now I've been able to become mature, patient, calm?
Yes. Yes, because actually, before I even did Ocha, I was very hard-headed,
Yeah.
very strong. I would snap very quickly.
Yeah.
And once I was crowned and the first year went through, I learned to control more my emotions because I went through a lot of emotions also under 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗲.
Yeah.
And he has helped me to balance myself.
Yeah. And if I recall, you said your path is Ayaguna, correct?
Yes.
Really interesting guy, because I think he really embodies the, how do I put this, the before Obatala rather than the after Obatala, because when we look at this gentleman, the way he's described, whether it be the warrior, the guy who would wipe his sword on his shirt,
Yes.
all these different things, that's a very different topic and picture that's painted than, the elderly, maybe 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗏, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗃 type thing, right? And there's a pataki in the 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗶𝗏𝗏, where there were like ongoing feuds between families and houses, and people were constantly arguing, and there was really no end to this, and 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗏𝗃 became very frustrated because he's like, everybody can have a good argument every now and again, but we kind of got to get on with life. We can't just be doing this over and over again. So with his dilemma, Obatala Ayaguna presented himself and said, if you allow me, I can end all of this for you, but you have to let me do it my way. And 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗏𝗃 said, well, what's your way? He said, the only way for a war to end is by bloodshed. So
Correct.
Allow me to introduce what I need to introduce so we can come to peace already. Because Iworiwo-san and Obatala taught everyone there can be no peace without war.
Correct.
Right? So he introduced the sword. He introduced the gun. He introduced all of the weapons that we know now today. And it was a very sad and tragic process, but ultimately peace came. Why am I mentioning this to you? You being a reincarnate of this energy. Do you feel like Obatala has always protected you and always allowed you to come out on top in the wars that you may have experienced as an Olorisha? Because we all go through them, you know.
Yes, I do. Because I have been through many wars. And always at the end of the day, I always say how we say Maferefun Obatala in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he has defended me from many different things that has gone on in my life, especially after being initiated.
And you guys really don't bother nobody. It's interesting. The children of Obatala, being somebody that's been in this culture some time as well, you begin to learn how to interact with your brothers and sisters, right? Because all we have in Orisha, as I like to say, is a bunch of feathers and personalities. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's different, and we have to have a lot of patience and understanding, because the best thing you could do is not take anything personally, right?
Correct.
But the children of Obatala, if someone is not experienced with them or someone hasn't interacted with them enough, they could be misinterpreted as arrogant. And I would say they're the furthest thing from, but what is their characteristic? They're very private. They're to themselves. They're in their own space. You know, have you experienced this misinterpretation where people may have been like, hey, Ricky, when I first met you, I had a completely different idea of who you were. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes. Yes, I have. And with a lot of people in the community.
Yeah.
You know, babalawos, olorishas, even spiritualists.
Yeah.
Because they see me, they'll come to me and look at me and say, oh, no, you're not who you say you are. And I just sit back and observe.
But I haven't said anything.
I haven't said anything.
You know?
And I have been persecuted without even saying anything.
Yeah.
Just by the type of person I am.
And that was Obatala's vibe. When he would come in dressed in all white, you know, people might get the wrong impression, like the so-called arrogance. And it wasn't that. He was just, if anything, I think Obatala at some point in his life was trying to protect himself. I think he was just trying to maintain that peace that he had found and not allow anybody to get out of his character, right?
Correct.
When you look at Orishanla, as he's known sometimes, another thing that he went through pretty heavily, at least the way it's interpreted, was addiction. Now, when we talk about addiction, I'm not only talking about substances. I'm talking about success, ambition, sweets, whatever anybody can become addicted to, right? When we look at Pataquis, where Obatala was actually, you know, one of the things that's most associated with him is the cascarilla, correct?
Correct.
Well, there's other powders that have similar characteristics that can be interpreted with as well.
Yes.
In the 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗍, and even though it doesn't explicitly say it, you know, it says that the child of Obatala interacted with powders, whether it may have been witchcraft, whether it may have been substance, maybe it was sugar, I don't know, but it had a very negative effect on him, right? Where it says that the child of Orishanla has to be careful with, you know, becoming overconsumptive of something. So I ask you, whether it's studying Orisha, whether it's being a wonderful father, whether it's, you know, any of the things that we can become addicted to, you as a child of Obatala, have you ever had to battle with that ambition of, I need to do this to be able to grow, you know?
Actually, I've never had much of any addictions. Yes, I did drink a lot, and it was definitely taken from me.
Yeah.
But other than that, addictions, I was blessed and thank Obatala every day. I never had that addiction. But as in wanting to learn the religion, I feel like that's my addiction.
Yeah.
Because I try to study.
That's a good addiction.
Of course.
That's
I try to study as much as possible. And to learn, because every day you're learning something new in this. There's something you might have not known yesterday that you learned today. And that's what I've always tried to do, you know, and try to be humble, because I'm a very humble person.
Well, that's what Obatala is. What does everybody say? Obatala es la humildad. Is the humility, first thing foremost. And I think, you know, that's why I like to delve into these other aspects of him, because I think the most beautiful thing about 𝗲𝗏 is, and what really sold me on 𝗲𝗏 is, these were imperfect people. You know, Orula had flaws, Obatala had flaws, Oshun had flaws, and they were able to overcome and change their lives. And that's what really resonated with me, because when we're from all these different walks of life and we've experienced so many different things, we want to know that we do have a second chance and that we can become better. And when we look at, you know, whether it was Obatala, any of these deities, they were able to overcome all of their failures, right?
Correct.
You know, in Obatala, I really think he gets a bad rap sometimes, because he got taken advantage of a lot. You know, his kindness, he was very charitable. You know, there's some Pataquis that speak of him, you know, having characteristics of either greed or, you know, being arrogant. You know, I think what we have to look at is what may have led people to that point in their life, right? And
correct.
You look at the 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗶, and in 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗶 was where Obatala had a sugarcane business. This is why Obatala loves sweets so much. In the 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗶, it says that the greatest adimu you can give to Obatala is sugarcane. So that's why you notice the tres leche, the dulce, all these things, right? And he had a sugarcane business, and he would sell guarapo, or sugarcane water. And this crab was walking by, and he was foaming at the mouth, you know? So Obatala said, holy crap, let me give this guy something to drink, you know what I'm saying? And when he gave the guy something to drink, he gave the crab something to drink, the crab looked at him and, you know, basically flicked him off. And Obatala was like, oh my God, you know, I just saved your life and this is how you treat me? And the crab said, yeah, and I'm not paying you. Obatala was like, I didn't ask you for any money, but, you know, now what happened, you know? So Obatala was very depressed about this, and his son, the snake, came by. He said, Papa, what's the matter? He said, you'll never believe this. The crab came by. He was foaming at the mouth. I saved his life. He made a gesture at me, and he says he's not paying me, and ya tú sabes. And the snake said, oh, my God, I can't tolerate that disrespect. I'm going to go get your money. And Obatala said, don't get involved. Let it go, But the snake couldn't handle it. So the snake went into the cave, and the crab, being listo, he said, I got you. And he grabbed the snake by the throat. And he choked him out, and he took him back to Obatala and said, you see what happens when you try to get your money from me? And Obatala said on that day, he's never giving anybody anything for free. So the reason I ask you this is because you being a child of Obatala, you being somebody that's initiated a numerous amount of people in various things, have you experienced that, unfortunately, where, without getting specific with people, but have you felt like it's a common theme with you guys where, there is a lack of appreciation?
Yes. Yes.
And how has that kind of affected you moving forward, becoming an elder?
It has affected me a lot because I have extended, how we say in the phrase in the religion, extend your hand as far as you can extend it.
Yeah.
And I have extended it to many people, godchildren, just clients. And at the end of the day, when they start moving up, it's like they forget who actually gave them that lending hand when they were down on the ground.
Yeah.
And, it has, me and my wife, that she's also initiated, have spoken about this many a times. And she has said to me, you got to be a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
Because your heart is too soft.
Yeah.
And it's hard. But, people, I guess you learn sometimes from mistakes.
Correct. Well, and it's hard to go back to being that harsh person when you first get initiated, and now you try to, assimilate this monk-like character of peace, patience, and then people, might take behaviors that are really, you'll never understand why people do what they do. But that's why Obatala said, I'll never do anything for free from this point forward, because that way I won't feel bad when they don't say thank you, And that's why Obatala is an Orisha that you have to really appease, in my opinion. I've noticed that to be able to get something out of Obatala, to be able to really get Obatala's attention, you have to really put in that effort,
Yes,
as a child of his, have you noticed that to be able to get that response, has it been strenuous sometimes?
Yes, very strenuous.
Yeah.
Very. It's been a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
Good days and bad days. And going to him, it's literally, I have to beg for him to do what he needs to do. Because he always sits back and reminds me, what I told you in 𝗀𝗲𝗏.
Yeah. And that's what it is. I mean, when you talk about him, you see that with Obatala a lot, is the fatherly, aspect of things, right? You have within a father, us both being one, you always have a duality to play, right? You have the father that's the friend. I want to give you everything. I want to be there for you. I want to console you. And then you have to be the father that is the teacher, and the teacher sometimes isn't the friend.
Correct.
You can't be a good friend and a good teacher at the same time sometimes we have to be, a little more intense. So I ask you, being the child of this Orisha, having him assimilated, how has he kind of made you want to become a better father every day? Seeing, him and, his legends and him being a father, how has that positively affected you?
In many aspects, because what I went through as a child, because it's funny, and not to get in too much into my personal life, but it's funny, I was raised without my father.
Yeah.
So being in this and seeing who he is has made me that better father to try to teach my daughter. And upon that, my daughter being also a child of Obatala.
Oh, wow. She got that same DNA.
Yes. So
Wow.
it's like we kind of bump heads here and there.
It's �2 cabezas grandes.
Sí.
𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗏
grande.
It's and just being a father in general. I mean, when you have children that start getting into adolescence, understanding how to interact with them, playing that role, trying to, not always, be the disciplinarian, be the friend, that balance. Obatala had to really learn it with his children because at one point, all of the Orishas turned on him.
Correct.
All of the Orishas were like, hey, you. And he was like, oh my God, I gave you guys everything. And that's when he goes to the mountain and he kind of distances himself. And that's why they had to go and visit him from that point forward, And you see in various Bataki the duality within Obatala, where on one behalf, he was an excellent father. He was a savior multiple times. Like there's so many Odus when Obatala saved his children. For example, like in the Odu of Osameji, when his son Talabi went to war with the Iami or the witches, he contracted Orula to save his son, right? And the Odu of Ofunkosun, when he saved the cotton from the flame, there's various patakis where he protected his children. And, that's why you'd hear the old Santeros say, I don't want no issues with no children of Obatala because I don't want no issues with their father, right? Yes. So have you felt that, based on him being your father, that you've kind of always had that luck or that blessing where that you kind of escape danger, you kind of escape all that negativity?
Yes. And even before I even knew who my guardian angel was, as a young kid, as a teenager, I used to always get an escape from all the troubles that was going on and the people that I was around when I was a young kid. And I have to say, as an adult and as a Santero or Orisha priest, Firifun Obatala every day of my life.
Yeah, he's the reason you're here. And you hear stories like yours, like you saying, hey, the things I got away with, the things I was able to survive. Obatala and the Odu of 𝗀𝗲𝗏 blessed the cat. The cat had his 8 lives, and then he's like, man, I'm done for. And Obatala gave him 1 more. He said, but this is the one that counts. So it really talks about why the Charo Obatala ultimately ends up in Orisha to be able to begin anew. When we talk about, the Orisha process and the rebirthing process, do you feel like when you went through that you were able to start a new life, that you were able to really transition into the man you've become now?
Yes. I really can say that. Yes, I did go through a very harsh 𝗀𝗶𝗱𝗲, but at the end of the day, everything that I wanted was there. He brought me mostly everything I've wanted.
Yeah.
And he has guided me all this time from day one till today.
Yeah. Now, the same way we talk about, the benevolent father, the loving father, the father that spoils his children, he was also a very strict guy. He was a very disciplinarian guy. Like, if you look at the Odu Ochetura, Obatala became so frustrated with his kids, he would throw them from heaven and allow them to fall onto earth, and who would save them was Orula, right? That's why there's such a huge link between you guys and Orumila, etc. But I mean, you mentioned 𝗃𝗏, and you mentioned all the taboos and advices that Obatala gave you. Without getting into specifics again, how harsh has that punishment been sometimes?
Sometimes very harsh.
Yeah.
Very harsh.
Would it be better to have an enemy than an angry Obatala?
Yes. Because at least the enemy, you can see them.
Yeah, right?
Him, you're like, okay, Baba, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's like, when does it end? But yes, I guess that comes with it when you have somebody that gives you so much, and then the one thing we know we shouldn't do that we do, and then, we get spanked for it. And being a son of Oshun, we go through it too. I've always heard that the most difficult ones to be children of, just based on the discipline, Obatala, Oshun, and Bawaluaye, I've heard as well, is very intense, where the children have to be very strict with their conduct because they're Orishas that really don't have patience for any nonsense. So I feel you with that. In the Odu of 𝗀𝗏𝗏, it speaks of when the child of Obatala would ask Obatala for blessings, right? Where he would perform a bowl and, want things in return from his guardian Orisha. And whenever he would do a bowl, 𝗃𝗏𝗏 would bring a bowl of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗏, which is like the oatmeal, that we consume.
Mm-hmm.
But the child of Obatala would look and be like, I don't want cornmeal. I want money. You know what I'm saying? I don't think he's hearing me. I don't know. And he would just, kind of put the bowls of oatmeal in the corner of his house. And one day Obatala is walking by and his son says, hey, what did I do to you? And he said, what did you do to me? What do you mean? What's the problem? He said, I've been asking you for blessings and you don't send me any. He said, 𝗃𝗏 didn't bring you the bowl? He said, yeah, but I don't need food. I need money. And he said, my child, what you didn't realize was I was giving you both. And when he took the spoon and went into the 𝗃𝗏, he saw that it was full of gold. He said, sometimes we have a lot, sometimes we have a little, but as long as we have something to eat, we're always wealthy. You know, have you been through or seen cases, better said, of Obatala testing his children like that, especially with patience?
Yes. Yes. I have been through, actually, and I'm going to use myself as an example. He has put me through a lot of tests. He has tested my faith, has tested, tested my pockets.
Oh, yeah.
My home. And, you know, I just go to him and say to him, well, you know what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that's important to touch on things like that, because you hear it, and this is why I'm trying to paint this portrait, because, you know, some people, all the Orishas are wonderful. The most beautiful thing about Ifa is that no one's left without a guardian, right? But, you know, you see some people that are getting in, they're like, oh, I want Chango, or I want to be a 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗲, or they're trying to pick and choose. And I went over this in one of our previous interviews. You get the one you need the most, the one that's going to teach you the most, the one that's going to help you elevate and become your true self. And with an Orisha like Obatala, it makes a lot of sense. You know, all the concepts of the patience and the tranquility. God doesn't make you patient. He gives you opportunities to be patient. God doesn't make you courageous. He gives you opportunities to have courage, you know. And I think Obatala is a really great example of that, because initially he's going to be misunderstood. Because when people have a guardian Orisha like that, they're like, the world is mine. And then some people, after they go through the Orisha process or they start getting involved, they're like, man, I'm going through it harder than when I got in. And they're like, why? And it's because Obatala has those tendencies. He's like, I'm going to make you work for it. Because his conduct was so all over the place. He was like, the only thing I needed was discipline. And I would have been able to avoid all of those things in my youth, you know?
Correct.
So Obatala is an interesting character, man. He really is, because he knew how to play both sides of the curtain. You know, he knew how to interact with everybody. He was the perfect politician. I think that's why his children are great leaders, or they influence, or they just play that role very easily. In the Odu of Ochanla was where 𝗃𝗏 lived with his father, Obatala. And 𝗃𝗏 would be the one to let people in and out of the house, kind of like he does till this day. And one day the devil walked in. And 𝗃𝗏 was like, "Oye, you know, what are you doing here?" He's like, "No, I'm here to see your father." He said, "My father doesn't want nothing to do with you. You're evil." And Obatala said, 𝗃𝗏, please, let him in. And 𝗃𝗏 was perplexed. He was like, oh my God, what's going on here? And he saw his father, Obatala, sit down and speak with the devil. And they were talking like they were friends. Oh, did you hear about this guy? Mira, hizo esto. Like, you know, it was just, they were doing business. And 𝗃𝗏 was like shook. So when they finished, they shook hands. And the devil said goodbye to 𝗃𝗏 and thanked him for his hospitality. And 𝗃𝗏 immediately went running to his father and said, you know, what was that all about? You know, to me, you're the epitome of purity, honesty, you know, goodness. How could you sit down and have breakfast with a guy like that? And Obatala said, mijo, you have to keep your enemies close.
Yeah.
And 𝗃𝗏 learned a very valuable lesson there. So being a child of Obatala, how do you feel he has helped you learn how to interact with people in general? Like, not only those that we enjoy their company, those that we may not as much, you know, how have those lessons kind of translated into your life, where, like, even though I know said person might not have the best intentions for me, I'm still able to carry myself a certain way?
Well, it's been a lot of ups and downs. There's been a lot of people in and out of my life that were good, and then there was some that were not. And I had to learn to keep that composure with these people. He has brought me the intelligence and the knowledge to learn how to overlook how we say in this world, the craziness that goes on in this world.
Especially in this religious world.
Yes,
Because
especially.
me and you, we worked together quite a few times.
Yes.
And, luckily when we interact, we have not only just us, but the overall way we kind of conduct our ceremonies. It's a very peaceful thing. We're enjoying ourselves. We're getting work done. It's very positive. But you having worked multiple other ceremonies, it's not always like that.
No.
And you have to get through a ceremony peacefully.
Yes.
So, just,
Yes.
yeah, has it helped you with that as well in that arena?
Yes.
No.
Yes, because in this religion, you see a lot of things that you can't. It's better to keep your mouth closed with.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's learning that diplomacy. It's learning who's best to work with, who's best to, reserve yourself with. And I think Obatala really taught us the perfect character, and not only in spirituality, but just in general. Because whether we're conducting business, whether we're, interacting socially, knowing how to be diplomatic. And he was the epitome of diplomacy, like in the 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗲𝗍. Relationships were a big thing with Obatala. I can't remember a pataki where he was single, And Ayaguna was married to Oshun at one point.
Yes.
They got divorced because he liked to eat the snail, right? But for the most part, when you looked at like 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲𝗏 and Osagirinyang, they always had a significant other, right?
Yes.
And you look in the 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗶𝗍𝗶, it speaks of when the moon came to live in Obatala's home, right? They were in a relationship. Before they moved in, everything was fine. She had her house, he had his. But as soon as she entered into his home, he started catching very bad anxiety. He's like, oh my God, she's everywhere. I can't look anywhere without her being there. In some versions, they figured it out. In other versions, they didn't. Why do I mention this? Because I met your wife, my regards to Miss Felicia, very nice woman. How important as a child of Obatala was it for you to really establish that bond with somebody and that link, to ultimately create your family, being that he has so much to do with, the fatherly figure in the home?
Well, it was a little rough in the beginning, and I was able to transitionate her to, move, because honestly, she didn't even know about our religion.
That's big.
I met her.
Yeah.
Her family is Muslim.
Oh, wow.
And I was the one that brought her into this.
Wow.
And to see her today is being crowned Agayu.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, because it was a lot of yays and nays and trying to transition her to everything. And it's hard living with a child of Agayu. It's not easy.
Yeah, especially the relationship that Obatala and Agayu had. But the fact that, she was able to make such strides with you, that you guys were able to grow into this spirituality and ultimately leave it as a legacy for your children, huge accomplishment. And that's why 𝗲𝗲 speaks of the importance of the child of Obatala to establish the home, because, without these key components, however the family dynamic works, you don't have a home, you have a house. And that's kind of what Ofunche was saying, that Obatala was king of the world, but he didn't have his counterpart. And a big reason why he didn't have it was because he had to go through that growing process of everybody has their space within the home. We're accountable to everybody in the home. I have to ask permission of my son to use the washing machine because, he's a fully employed adult and he has to wash his clothes. Before when I was a single man, I go to the laundromat. I didn't have to think about those things. But Obatala was really the first example for man to be able to incorporate himself peacefully into a home, so that's huge that you guys were able to, come from different backgrounds and then establish a home within 𝗲𝗲 and Orisha.
Yes.
You being, interacting with that energy for so long, what would you say or advise the new children or newly revealed children of Obatala? What can you advise them to make that transition easier?
Well, first of all, learn from their mistakes. Because when you're initiated, you're going to do a lot of mistakes. Learn from your mistakes. Learn from your elders. Use your minds. Use your heads. And walk that path what 𝗲𝗲 has given you to do. Because a lot of people want think that 𝗏𝗏𝗏 only lasts for 1 year. That's for the rest of their life.
Are you still having things in your 𝗏𝗏𝗏 manifesting right now?
Yes.
15 years later?
Yes.
Oof.
Yes. And there's still plenty more to come.
You look at that, and you hear somebody with your experience talking about how impactful things are over a decade later. It's important for people coming in to really hear that, because Orisha is interesting because it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like adolescence. You come in thinking you're going to dominate the world. You're going to know more songs than anyone. You're going to, give a better 𝗏𝗏𝗏 than anyone, any of these different things. Obatala explained it has to do with patience.
Yes.
That it truly is a marathon, and when you look at that energy, Obatala, even though Shango is the king of our religion, I really feel in many ways Obatala is the owner of our religion. He was the first 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏, the first one to divine with the cowrie shell. He was one of the first to actually interact with Ifa. All of these different aspects. And one thing we learned about or from him consistently was that he was able to achieve it through patience.
Yes.
So now we talked about the newly revealed children of Obatala. What advice would you give to people who are interacting with children of Obatala? What's the best way to interact with a child of Obatala? Peacefully.
Well, again, a lot of them are very hard-headed. You have to learn to deal with their stubbornness.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are very stubborn. Again, we are the heads of all the heads. But where there's a head, there's also a tail. And you got to start from the bottom up. So a lot of these young santeros y 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏s that are starting off, listen to your godparents. Listen to your padrino, your madrina, your jubona, your babalao, your oriate, whoever. Listen to people that have more experience, because a lot of problems with this is a lot of people come into this and they think tomorrow, mañana, they're going to become millionaires.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
And especially los hijos Obatala, the children of Obatala, he makes us start very slowly.
The snail. He makes you walk a very modest path, Then if you look at the qualities of Obatala in general, they're the characteristics of the 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏. And we just came out with that episode on the 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏, and there's a reason for that. Being that he's the father of us all, he had to be that first example of this is how you go through your purification process, right?
Yes.
That there's no coincidence with that. And it's interesting you mention, people with those characteristics coming in, because if you look at the Odu Oturasa, right? And that sign was where Obatala had a son, and his son was the mosquito. And he knew the mosquito had great potential, so he wanted to give him his own kingdom, right? So the mosquito went for divination with Orunmila to see how his new empire was going to go, and etc. And Orunmila told him to avoid vices, to avoid arrogance, to avoid any type of low frequency stimulation. And the mosquito was like, yeah, no problem. But when he goes over there, people were already having issues with him because he was a child of Obatala. And, they knew the benefits he had, the fact that he had received his kingdom by way of gift, and they wanted to embarrass him. So when he got there, they offered him, courtesies. They said, hey, have a drink with us. Hey, party with us. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Be our friend. And rather than listening to Orula and his father, he indulged, right? He tried to do too much. And what did it ultimately result in? When Obatala came to visit, after he hadn't heard from his son in a while, he saw him basically drowning himself in water, right, or alcohol. And when Obatala looked at him and he said, my son, I gave you a kingdom, but you weren't ready to wear the crown. And that's why till this day the mosquito lives in water, right?
Yes.
Do you see that, apart from, all the different guardian orishas, do you see how a child of Obatala not listening to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, not listening to Ifa, not listening to what's been established by the guardian orisha, do you see how they could have a similar fate of failure? Have you seen it as well?
Yes. I actually know some children of Obatala that are actually right now babalawos.
Yeah.
And he's gone through a lot. He went into drugs, a lot of things.
Yeah.
because he did not listen to his ita. And me and him are very good friends, and we talk here and there on a daily basis. And ita is everything, and that's what a lot of people get a misconception. It's everything. It's your life from when you start to when you finish. Yeah, everybody has to. You have to listen to what is told to you, to you in your ita, so you can progress in life.
If you could speak to yourself about to go into that room, what would you say to yourself? What advice would you give to yourself before going into the room of Orisha? Knowing all that you know now as an elder.
Well, the first thing I would say is, honestly, the religion has changed a lot.
In what aspects? I mean, you having a career that spans over a decade, how was Orisha back then compared to now?
Well, back then, honestly, there was a little bit more respect for elders.
Yeah.
Which today you go by and you see young Olorishas, 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗲s, they don't respect elders.
I'm not trying to cut you off. It's so crazy that you say that because, it's ironic. I'm with someone the other day and we're walking, and I think we're dressed like this now because we're doing the interview and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
But I usually don't wear anything. Like I usually kind of am very discreet in that regard. And I see somebody walking by that's clearly a 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗏, right? Now, mind you, the only thing that's 𝗃𝗏𝗶 about them is the color that they're wearing, because
Correct.
everything else that they're wearing isn't very 𝗃𝗏𝗏-like, right? So I'm with somebody else that has a certain, priesthood in this, and they're like, Joseph, you're not going to salute? I said, well, here's the thing. I can't really salute something I don't agree with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to reprimand anybody because that's not my character.
Correct.
I've always been taught, mind your business.
Correct.
And then apart from that, there's been so many times when I've actually saluted or Santo, however, and people look at me completely oblivious. They're like, I don't even know what that is. But you just initiated into a whole priesthood.
Correct.
And I think who's really to blame here? Is it the initiate? Is it us, the elders? There's so many dynamics that go into that. I mean, have you experienced that, where people just completely have you seen people disregard other people's, how do I say this? Their age, their wisdom, you have elders, like you said, your godfather, 50 some odd years in Orisha. It's an absolute crime when people like that don't receive that respect. And that's not just us in the 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗏, that's all the way back to Africa.
Yes.
How do you how does it end for people who kind of take on that behavior?
Honestly, it could end bad.
Yeah.
Because whatever it is, if it's Obatala, they have crown, Chango, Jemaya, Gayu, whoever, Orisha. Olodumare is watching.
Yes.
The Orisha is watching. And not to say that we're putting ourselves lower than that other person, but you're not respecting them as a person. You're respecting what's on their head. And you have to respect that crown because the Orisha is watching everything we do. And Olodumare is watching our character, what we do. And I have gone through it. I have seen it. I have been places where you have santeros, how we say this, got 2-3 years and they don't even look at you and respect that you are an elder in the religion.
It's almost like a frustration. Do you ever feel like
Yes.
there's that frustration, And I tell you, I think there's a big misconception with our generation in that regard. We're entering into a generation where there's a lot of instant gratification, where there's a lot of feeling of deservedness, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, you being even older than me in Orisha, I mean, those first steps when you're coming in, it's grueling. It's like, hey, peel a chicken. Hey, rip an herb. Hey, 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗄𝗃, all these different things. And back then, I think we were a little more open to it, maybe the way we were raised, maybe just understanding like the way the elders kind of maneuvered things. But now you're not seeing that kind of, I guess you could say obedience or,
Yes.
And how do you think that's going to affect ultimately the practice?
From what I feel, and it's funny because I have sat with my wife and talked to her about this. I said, if the way things are going now, I pray to the Orisha, to Olodumare and the Orishas, that the religion can continue. But if the way that things are going on now, it don't seem like it will, because those customs are being left behind. Like you said, you go to Ocha Santo, people don't want to pluck chickens.
Claro.
No quieren sacar la 𝘄cie.
Yeah.
They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. They just go, come, and out the door.
Everybody wants to sing the loudest.
Yes. And half of them don't even know the songs.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, and me and Erica have talked about this, and that's why, whether it's you, whether it's your significant other, the people we invite, very prepared people. I've never been the kind of guy to really gravitate towards popularity. I'm not a fan of that. I don't need to be around certain people because of whatever notability they may have. I really have always been a fan of fundamental people, stoic people. Like, hey, we're here to accomplish something, and we can have a good time doing it, but we still have a goal. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
That's why you've literally been on our list. And another thing I'd like to touch on with you, Ricky, because you're an interesting case in that regard. You're scratched as a 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃𝗍, if I recall right, a priest of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲.
Yes.
And how many years has that been now?
96, I got scratched.
Oh God, so what's that? 24 years?
Yes.
Wow. So that was even before. So you had a whole life in 𝘃𝗏 even before coming into Obatala.
Correct.
And what were those first steps like? Like, who initiated you in 𝘃𝗏 and stuff like that?
Well, I was initiated by a child of Ogum.
Nice.
He's probably got 40 plus years. Tata.
Old schooler.
Old schooler. From Cuba. I'm 𝘃𝗏𝗿𝗃𝗍.
Yeah.
It was gruesome. He was a big guy. So the secrets pom-pom was not fun.
Yeah.
Very knowledgeable. They used to call him the African.
Okay.
Because when he would talk not only to the Ocha, but to 𝘃𝗏, they would mistake him if he was speaking in African.
Yeah, he had a heavy dialect.
And he taught me a lot. He schooled me on what I needed to know and not to know. And it was something that, as a young kid, as a young teenager, I wanted to learn. I wasn't out like some young 16-year-olds looking for this girl, doing this, going to the... No, I was in there with him, studying, learning how to build gangas, learning how to build luceros, learning the songs, learning how to do the sacrifices and everything. And it was a very good experience with him.
He's passed on?
No.
Oh, nice.
No, he's not. He's actually somewhere in Orlando. Back in 2000, he moved to Kentucky.
Nice.
And from what I just heard, he moved back to Florida, but I'm not too sure where he's at. I've been trying to look for him.
Nice. Well, that's another thing. I mean, you talk about initiating 30 years ago. Those lanes of communication aren't like now. You know what I'm saying? Where like some people will be like, "Oh my God, you're not in contact with said elder anymore." People move. People, people's situations change. Life happens. So that's actually a really common theme. But I think the most important thing is you got the knowledge you did, even before the life took you in different directions. Now, you have some people, and I personally don't agree with this per se, but you have some people say, "Oh, the son of Obatala, no scratching," right? I mean, I personally have seen the children of Obatala do very well in 𝘃𝗏.
Yes.
I think it has to be that way, being that 𝘃𝗏𝗿𝗃𝗏 does exist.
Correct.
But I ask you, as a son of Obatala, Tata, has the scratching interrupted any of your progress as a priest?
No.
How has it benefited you, in your opinion?
Actually, it has benefited me a lot, because not only that I'm a spiritualist from a little child, being scratched, it has opened up my, how we say, third eye even more. And it never put any stops to anything, progress. That is funny, I actually got more ahijados in 𝘃𝗏 than I do in Ocha.
Would you look at that? When it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Destiny, there is no confusion or coincidence. So for all those people that may be out there, children of Obatala, who are called to 𝘃𝗏 and are interested in that priesthood, even more than maybe the Orisha one, you're looking at an example of somebody amongst many, whether it is Obatala or Oshun, that have been able to excel within that priesthood, regardless of their Orishanla 𝗵𝗸𝗶𝗲. So that's very promising. Ricky, I mean, this has been a wonderful interaction, man. I have to ask you, would you like to leave any final thoughts on your behalf for the community? Things you'd like to say, people you'd like to mention, etc.
Well, the best thing is do is listen to your godparents, listen to your elders. There's always a phrase, the grass is not greener on the other side.
Buru.
But if you get into the right hands and the right houses, you will progress. There are, how we say in Spanish, charlatanes out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of unethical people.
But we, as long as everybody gets in the right hands and does the things right, they will progress. And pretty much that's about it.
Ricky, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Joseph, for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Family, want to say thank you and a couple notes before we go ahead and disconnect. Merchandise can be purchased at botanicacandlesandmore.com, along with spiritual readings and baths. If you're looking for more specific things in the inventory, please contact 407-440-2086. 𝗙𝗲 and Orisha classes, as well as spiritist mentorship programs are occurring. From Botánica Candles and More, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 and Our Roots Podcast, thank you. And until next time, see the light.